Dean Martin, a performer who once dominated stages with humor, charisma, and music, appeared diminutive and frail now. The haze from his cigarette floated idly, much like the recollections of his existence drifting through the atmosphere. He glanced about, his gaze flashing with a profound, unspoken weight. No applause or adoring fans awaited, only the shocked quiet of his relatives, unable to contain their sorrow. Early years and professional path. Dean Martin entered the world as Dino Paul Crocetti on June 7, 1917, in Steubenville, Ohio, to an impoverished household. His dad, Gaetano, an Italian immigrant barber from Montesilvano, and his mom, Angela, an Italian-American from Ohio. Dean had an elder sibling, William. Growing up was tough. By age 15, he boxed under the alias Kid Crocet. He was resilient, enduring many injuries and fractured hands in bare-knuckle matches, displaying his determination to battle through hardships. He humorously claimed that out of his 12 bouts, he triumphed in all except 11. Eventually, he quit boxing and took a job as a croupier in an unlawful gambling den while performing with nearby groups. Starting as Dino Martini, inspired by a renowned opera artist, he later adopted Dean Martin, securing his initial major opportunity with the Ernie Mackay Orchestra and subsequently appearing in New York. Dean's private life was just as turbulent. In October 1941, he wed Elizabeth Betty Ann McDonald. They resided in Cleveland Heights and raised 4 kids before separating in 1949. Yet family stayed central to his existence amid the fluctuations. In his career, Dean's major success arrived when he paired with comic Jerry Lewis in 1946. Their debut was at Atlantic City's 500 Club, where their routine was unpolished and disorganized, prompting the owner to threaten dismissal unless they improved. Conferring behind the scenes, they opted to risk it all, blending tunes, sketches, and ad-libs. The crowd adored it. Their duo advanced from clubs to TV, radio, and movies, including their debut film, My Friend Irma, 1949. Martin and Lewis forged a solid bond and artistic collaboration, employing emerging writers like Norman Lear to refine their performance. However, strains emerged over time. Martin sensed confinement by the repetitive dialogues and narrow characters, culminating in their well-known parting in 1956, precisely a decade after their initial show. Post-split, Martin's independent career flourished. His first solo movie, 10,000 Bedrooms, 1957, flopped, but he revived it with serious roles like The Young Lions, 1958, alongside Marlon Brando and Montgomery Clift. He then starred in Rio Bravo, 1959, and collaborated with Frank Sinatra in hits like Some Came Running, 1958, and the Rat Pack staple Ocean's 11, 1960. Martin sustained musical triumphs too, especially with Everybody Loves Somebody, which notably displaced the Beatles from the charts in 1964. He also ventured into country music and earned the Country Music Association's Man of the Year title in 1966. The Dean Martin Show solidified his fame, airing from 1965 to 1974. Unlike his on-stage image, Dean was restrained with drinking and frequently headed home to his loved ones. It transitioned into celebrity roasts that ran until 1984. Outside showbiz, Dean made smart investments, such as in golf and RCA shares, demonstrating his business acumen extended beyond the spotlight. Combining wit, allure, and a touch of playfulness, Dean Martin's professional journey spanned music, cinema, and TV, and he is recalled for those traits even now. Personal experiences. Dean Martin's private world was as vibrant and dynamic as his work, featuring 3 unions, multiple offspring, and lasting ties with kin and companions. In 1941, he first tied the knot with Elizabeth Ann Betty McDonald from Ridley Park, Pennsylvania. They created a home and had 4 children: Craig, 1942, Claudia, 1944, Gail, 1945, and Dina, 1948. Their marriage dissolved in 1949, yet it laid the groundwork for Martin's enduring dedication to family. That same year, Dean wed Dorothy Jean Beager, a former Orange Bowl queen from Florida. This union endured 24 years until 1973, producing 3 more kids: Dean Paul, 1951, Richie, 1953, and Gina, 1956. Tragically, Dean Paul perished in a military aircraft accident in 1987, and Richie died in 2016, inflicting profound grief that Martin bore silently. Despite difficulties, he stayed connected to his children and engaged in their lives. Mere weeks after divorcing Jean, Martin married Catherine Hahn in 1973. Hahn was 26, while Dean was 55. She had worked as a receptionist at a Beverly Hills beauty parlor. The marriage ended in 1976 with no natural children, but Martin adopted Hahn's daughter, Sasha, illustrating his ongoing family commitment in his later phase. After this, he had a short romance with model and old acquaintance Pat Sheehan, though it didn't endure. Dean's family links extended beyond his home. His uncle Leonard Barr featured in many of Martin's programs, adding a personal element to his work. His kids also formed bonds with stars in entertainment and athletics. His daughter Gina wed Carl Wilson of the Beach Boys. Figure skater Dorothy Hamill and actress Olivia Hussey became daughters-in-law via his son Dean Paul, and his oldest son Craig was wed to Lou Costello's daughter Carol until her early passing. Beyond family, Martin pursued pastimes and charity. He raised Andalusian horses at his Hidden Valley Ranch in Thousand Oaks, California, and contributed to fundraisers, including the Bergson Group in the late 1940s. Politically, he identified as Republican, yet his opinions could flex. He backed Democratic contender Lyndon B. Johnson in 1964. In the 1960s and early 1970s, Martin resided in Bel Air, Los Angeles, in a residence later purchased by Tom Jones in 1976. Through his personal journey, Dean Martin juggled stardom's demands with loyalty to family, friends, and hobbies. He was a caring parent, a steadfast companion, and someone who cherished his relationships with those nearest. Despite separations, losses, and shifts, he bequeathed a heritage of affection, charisma, and strong familial connections. Misunderstandings about his drinking image. Many recall Dean Martin as the suave crooner with a whiskey tumbler in hand, the ultimate laid-back guy who always appeared somewhat inebriated on stage or screen. However, that was mostly a facade rather than reality. His intoxicated crooner character, the unsteady gait, mumbled words, constant drink, was primarily theatrical. In truth, relatives and associates later disclosed a contrasting truth. Per his daughter, the beverage he held on stage frequently wasn't liquor, but apple juice at times. His son confirmed this, noting he seldom witnessed his father truly intoxicated during shows. What viewers saw was entertainment, not genuine drunkenness. Dean himself confessed in a 1961 interview with a prominent publication that he consumed about 1/10 as much as he feigned. He noted that the endearing drunk routine distinguished him, creating a distinctive on-stage persona blending allure, relaxation, and comedy. Additionally, Martin wasn't irresponsible off-stage. By various reports, he maintained discipline in his routines, often being the first to end evenings. When not working, he favored returning to his domestic life, family, schedules, and occasionally golf. This disparity between public view and private fact meant Martin fell prey to his own triumph. The persona that rendered him legendary, the tipsy, nonchalant star, caused folks to assume he was always intoxicated, perhaps even dependent on alcohol. Yet the reality appears more subtle. This isn't to say Dean abstained entirely. He drank, but moderately, not to the extent presumed. The distinction is important. Dean Martin's boozy persona wasn't his authentic self. It was a role he enacted to amuse audiences and suit his program's atmosphere. It built his myth, but also misled many into believing that was his daily existence. Recognizing this portrays Dean in a gentler, truer perspective. The individual beneath the quips, glass, and formal wear was actually structured, reserved, and family-oriented. The amusing, inebriated routine was merely that, a routine. It served to shield his genuine identity, not mirror his actual behaviors. This insight humanizes his narrative and underscores that artists frequently conceal their true selves behind personas that captivate the world. Strains with Jerry Lewis. To most, Martin and Lewis are recalled as one of comedy's greatest pairs, the polished vocalist Dean, the frantic and silly Jerry. But beneath the chuckles and elegant attire, frictions accumulated until they erupted in 1956. A key issue was artistic goals. Dean Martin didn't always desire the role of the serious counterpart, the composed singer awaiting Jerry's gags. He sought to expand his skills in singing, acting, perhaps dramatic work. Jerry thrived on the comedic turmoil. Their directions began diverging. Compounding this were their temperaments. Jerry was vibrant, meticulous, constantly striving for greater humor, action, disorder. Dean was casual, unworried, and reportedly uncomfortable with the ongoing buzz surrounding Lewis. Predictably, these contrasts sparked disputes. As years passed, the humor dulled, and backstage vibes turned bitter. It peaked during their last film, Hollywood or Bust, 1956. Accounts indicate Martin, sensing he was more accessory than equal, reached his limit. Lewis recalled Martin saying, "To me, you're nothing but a fucking dollar sign." That was brutally direct and painful. Their formal separation occurred on July 25, 1956, exactly a decade post their debut. They fulfilled one final performance at the Copacabana due to contractual obligations. After leaving the stage, they silently pursued independent paths. Following the breakup, things transformed. Dean Martin shifted toward a more serene, managed form of achievement. He emphasized singing, acting, and soon joined the famed Rat Pack. His approach was relaxed, sleek, and natural, forming the basis of his solo endeavors. Jerry Lewis, conversely, dove headlong into exuberant, dynamic comedy. He preserved the physical humor that defined him and eventually reimagined himself as a key director and artist. In hindsight, it's poignant because their synergy was exceptional. Together, they crafted a unique enchantment that amused millions nationwide. They complemented one another. Dean's serene appeal and Jerry's volatile wit meshed flawlessly on stage. Yet even the most robust collaborations fracture when the individuals diverge. Their division wasn't truly about stardom, finances, or popularity. It stemmed from core differences, contrasting dispositions, objectives, and future visions. Dean craved tranquility, consistency, and an opportunity to forge his identity. Jerry sought vigor, authority, and perpetual artistic drive. Those routes couldn't align indefinitely. Once their outlooks parted, their alliance had no further direction, and the enchantment they shared dissolved into reminiscence. Political inconsistencies. One might assume a self-proclaimed lifelong Republican would consistently back his party's candidates, but Dean Martin challenged such expectations. Though he identified as Republican throughout much of his adulthood, records show he endorsed Lyndon B. Johnson, the Democratic presidential nominee, in 1964. This choice sparked surprise. For numerous admirers and analysts, temporarily aligning with the opposition appeared inconsistent. After all, backing a Democratic leader seemed contrary to the Republican identity Martin openly held. Yet this inconsistency revealed something profound. Martin's politics, akin to his public image, weren't tied to rigid affiliations, but to his instincts at the time. Why Johnson? The 1964 race was extraordinary. Mere months prior, Johnson had pushed through the pivotal Civil Rights Act of 1964, banning discrimination based on race, faith or origin in public spaces nationwide. For many, particularly in showbiz and affected communities, this elevated Johnson's bid beyond partisan lines. Endorsing him signified a stance on fairness and equality, not politics. For Martin, whose profession immersed him in diverse circles, Johnson's ideals perhaps resonated with his experiences. We can't pinpoint the exact influences, but his support shows even a traditional Republican could evaluate principles and decide differently. Naturally, such a shift drew backlash. Some likely saw it as disloyalty or fickle politics. Fans and fellow Republicans expected allegiance. Celebrities switching sides often invite doubt, genuine belief, or trend chasing. This highlights how, in today's divided politics, public figures crossing aisles seems odd. But perhaps it was more common then to prioritize values or situations over party. Martin's backing of Johnson defies simplistic politics, showing individuals, including stars, can possess complex, adaptable views. The Republican tag might have suited a charismatic performer, but when times changed, he adapted. This aisle crossing enriches his legacy. Dean Martin wasn't merely the suave vocalist, but someone ready to make choices outside partisan confines. Cultural insensitivity and humor. When recalling Dean Martin and the Rat Pack, formal wear, Vegas sparkle, liquor-infused allure, rapid-fire laughs, it seems like pure enjoyment. But beneath the shine, their comedy frequently depended on ethnic and racial quips. Various reports of their performances indicate they didn't hold back. Documentation shows that in shows featuring Sammy Davis Jr., who was black and Jewish, gags targeting his race or faith were routine. A common element was Davis serving as the target for jokes about his ethnicity, complexion, beliefs, and even exaggerated black stereotypes. Some humor referenced the Klan or bus separation, a crude stab at boldness that amused then but fails today. In specific roast segments of the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast, the comedy reportedly veered into racial caricatures as hosts and participants commented on Davis's heritage. Beyond Davis-focused quips, there was intra-group ethnic teasing. Italian-American roots, like those of Dean Martin and peers, became fodder for laughs. Their routines occasionally mocked national heritage, faith, and backgrounds, satirizing cliches for amusement. To their merit, by era standards, the Rat Pack allegedly declined gigs at venues excluding black or Jewish artists. Yet this didn't halt on-stage jests. Thus, a conflict existed between societal advancement, refusing discriminatory bookings, and persistent use of racial, ethnic cliches for comedy. They behaved as if acceptance and bias could coincide, which appears profoundly inconsistent now. Remember the entertainment climate then. Crowds anticipated irreverence, sharp wit, and playful jabs. The boundary between amusing and now offensive differed. What elicited laughter in the 1960s or 70s might provoke discomfort or outrage today. That doesn't excuse the humor, it contextualizes it. In retrospect, this aspect muddles Dean Martin and the Rat Pack's appeal and talent. Their music, flair, and performance prowess remain undisputed, but their comedic triumphs often hinged on racial or ethnic mockery, even while advocating against segregation in venues, underscoring how damaging and paradoxical their cool image could be. Age and gender cliches. Viewing vintage footage of the Dean Martin Show, with sleek suits, hazy lounge ambiance, and casual appeal, evokes timeless, relaxed amusement. Yet scrutinizing reveals much humor relied on portraying women as comedic accessories, with complimentary remarks, sly comments, and playful flirtation that was normative in the 1960s, but now seems awkward. He was famous for pursuing female guests on his program, often with garbled jests or semi-earnest advances as part of his relaxed crooner role. The show regularly showcased female celebrities, vocalists, and performers, with their inclusion often emphasizing appearance or charm over ability. Examples include the troupe Gold Diggers, formerly Ding-a-ling Sisters, a collection of appealing female singers and dancers who appeared frequently, presented more as visual appeal than co-equals. Even in roast segments, humor frequently centered on gender tropes. Female honorees were teased not for achievements, but looks, relationship status, or image. A 1970s analysis of roasts and comedy suggests this style heavily objectified women, diminishing them to physicality rather than recognizing full personas. It's not isolated gags. Scholars note in vintage variety programs, women were commonly the joke's target, the shrewish spouse, the seductress, seldom allowed independent humor. Such content rarely sparked concern then. Audiences accepted formats where men held the spotlight and women provided affirming grins or alluring chuckles. Years later, attitudes on gender and dignity have evolved. What seemed benign now often appears as dehumanization, echoing societal gender disparities in media. From today's viewpoint, parts of Dean's legacy don't endure gracefully. The allure, tunes, chuckles persist, but how women were mocked, reduced to advances or stereotypes, illustrates comedies and culture's progression. Health and passing. Dean Martin's closing years involved silent battles, diminishing public outings, and a sorrowful deterioration that intimates sensed before the wider world. For much of his existence, Martin was famed for his natural grace, melodic tone, languid grin, attire, and perpetual smoke. But that chronic tobacco use ultimately overtook him. In September 1993, physicians at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center identified lung cancer, a turning point. Advised that operation might prolong his days, Dean declined.